And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which Swinburne's main campus stands, on the land of the Wurundjeri people, and acknowledge the land that you're on today, and acknowledge that it was never ceded. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional knowledges and stories that our First Nations people so kindly share with us in their role as traditional custodians of the land and in their role as our land's first storytellers. So I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Beta Zifaranlu, who is the manager of this amazing set of initiatives, to talk about the session today. Thank you, Beta.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I would like to welcome you all, especially if you're coming from Sarawak. We have our amazing guest speaker from Sarawak today. So this session for the following 1 hour is going to cover the effective storytelling with data visualization. Why do we care about this? So you hear that storytelling, we talk about the indigenous community, how the amazing stories still are inspiring us. So if we are in science or any different disciplines at university, I guess part of your passion, part of your research might be about how you communicate the outcome of that with the community. And this storytelling is an approach that we would love to offer. And of course, because I'm coming from the science backgrounds, we would love to bring that science, scientific data and that mixed with the visualization part of this storytelling narrative. So for that, we have a competition, Start Talking, which is coming in November. We have a live showcase on 6th of November. If you are if you would like to participate, please reach out to us, and we would love to receive your 4-minute video on any innovative idea that you have, which is coming with a social impact, sustainable impact, and especially part of this visualization can be applied, part of that narrative, by Monday, 3rd of November. And with this introduction, introducing what we offer as part of Shaping STEM Futures program and Start Talking, I would love to introduce Michael, who is going to get us to this 1 hour informative session. Michael, it's all yours now.
All right, can I share my screen?
Of course you can.
So thank you so much, Caroline and Bita, for the great and informative introduction. I'm very honored to be invited to share my experience about this topic, effective storytelling with data visualization. So I'm Miko. I'm currently the senior lecturer with the School of ICT from Swinburne, Sarawak. Before working as a lecturer, I'm a professional data scientist. So I really appreciate the importance of a good data visualization in telling the story and subsequently persuade our decision maker, like the management, on the findings and recommendations from our data analysis. So in these sessions, I will actually present 4 subtopics as part of the effective storytelling for through data visualization. We will start with the fundamental topic, like what is a visualization, an overview of it, a brief history, what, why, and why is it important, how can we design it, followed by a mini activity. And then we will continue on with design principles. So this is a technical stuff that outlines some of the best practices researched by the researcher in this design field for many decades already. They have established a set of design guidelines, such as graphical integrity, which we can just apply directly while designing our own visualization. Thirdly, I will actually share some of the technique that you can use while trying to tell a story using your visualizations. And depending on the purpose, exploratory or explanatory, there are different strategies that you can adopt. Okay. And lastly, I would like to share some tools that I personally use to create data visualization and share with you the example project that I have worked on using this tool. So why do we need visualizations? Okay, I believe most of us here, we are from science background. Personally, I'm from engineering and computing background. I would consider myself a scientist because I'm a researcher. Okay, as a scientist, we do have the responsible to conduct research that can benefit the broader society, but we're also responsible in disseminating the findings from our research and communicated to the public in a clear, honest, and transparent manner. And data visualizations actually play an important part of it because a lot of the scientific data that we are generated may not be comprehensible by the general public, but if we can convert them into an effective data visualization, it will help us in the communication process. Formally, data visualization is defined as the formation of a mental image in our internal brain, or it could be a representation of a set of information externally. So what do we really mean by this? Okay, so we are trying to transform abstract information or data into an interactive visual graphical representation for the purpose of exploring, communicating, confirming, and presentation. And it is important to have an effective data visualization that can help us instead of hinder us from understanding the information. So what do I mean by this? Humans have limited memory and attentional resources, okay? And data visualizations should be designed in a way that it can help us to reduce the burden on our connection. If you look at the slide here, okay, there's a mathematical multiplication question. If I ask you, what is 264 multiply 72? Can you give me the answer without using any external tool? Meaning you have to use your brain. Okay, another scenario would be if I allow you to use a pen and a paper, a piece of paper, to write it down and do the calculation. Will you find it easier as compared to no external tool at all? I think you will find it easier. Of course, the easiest would be calculator, but let's not go to that scenario. Let's just compare, scenario A without any external tool. You have to do it purely inside your brain, or with pencil and paper for you to write down and calculate. Okay, so this is what we mean by external tool, data visualization as a tool for reducing our cognitive burden as an external cognition, using the elements outside of our head to think and reduce the cognition load or burden on our brain. So if I have so much information and 10 years of climate change data, and I try to explain to you just verbally and you have to imagine it in your brain, versus showing you a graph that is well designed, you can immediately feel the differences. Okay, and that's why we want to have a good visualizations, because it's really about external connection, how the resources, the visual outside your mind can be used to boost the cognitive capabilities of the brain. Okay, so let's look at some of the example. Okay, the earlier visualization, the very first pie chart here, as you can see, that can show the composition, okay, like African, European. And then this one also the very first bar chart, okay, that shows the export and imports of Scotland to and from different parts. Okay, it's quite clear, right? Instead of just using textual. So this is a very famous visualizations that we always show in our class related to data visualization. It is a simple 2D graph, but it can capture a lot of informations inside it. Okay, this is probably the best statistical graphic ever drawn by Charles Joseph Minard. It actually portrays the losses suffered by the Napoleon armies during the Russian campaign in 1812. So you can see this is a timeline, okay? And the size of the colored graph here actually shows the populations of the army. So beginning at the Polish-Russian border, the thick band here, okay, shows that the army is quite big in the beginning. And then as they try to march forward, okay, and then they retreat, you can see that the size of the army actually shrink down because of the losses of life due to the army, due to the weather, okay. So you can see that there are many dimensions that are being represented in just one graphic. First of all, the title tell us what is this event about. And then the timeline, 1812 to 1813, 1 year. And then in the beginning, this is the size of the army. As they move forward, the army get reduced to Moscow, and then they try to retreat from Moscow back to their origin. You can see in the end, you can compare the original size of the army and the eventual survival, okay, on this band. And then at the bottom, you can see it include the weather information, which can tells you that this the weather, a very harsh weather here, which might be the reason why suddenly there's a huge decrease in the size. Okay, so this is what we mean by effective visualization. It's not only a simple graph with just X and Y, 2 dimension. A good visualization will be able to represent more than 2 dimension. Okay, this is another visualization that is quite famous and that saves thousands of lives. It is drawn by John Snow, who is an epidemiologist. He created this map to visualize the location of the water pump and the households in London due to the cholera cases. Okay? I think this happened in the 18th centuries, where suddenly there are people who are suffering from cholera cases and we don't know what's the reason. So this epidemiologist try to visualize it. Is it related to the water? And then they try to visualize the location of the pump and then the house of the cholera cases. By interviewing the household with death cases, they discovered that a particular water pump on the Broad Street is the culprit. It was contaminated by the bacteria that cause cholera. So this is an early example of how we can use visualization to first record down the data, then we analyze and eventually discover important insight that's hidden, okay, using visualization. Nowadays, it's even more important because we know we are living in the era of big data, a lot of data that is beyond our human ability to comprehend, right? That's why we need to somehow use visualizations to summarize the data so that we can look at the trend. So the ability to take data, to understand it, to process it, and extract value from it is a very important skill in the next decade, in this age of big data. Okay, because now we have a lot of data. How do we harness value from the data is the key skill, which is also the objective of our workshop today. So I would like to end the first subtopic with this activity. Have any of you read this book by Hans Rosling, which is on the visualizations, very famous book on visualization? So you can see that Hans Rosling is a statistician. He actually created a graph to relate income with life expectancy. So together we can watch a video, and while watching the video, I will need your help to tell me how many dimensions are there in one visualization. What do I mean by dimension? It is really the variable. For example, in the time series graph, we will have X as the time, Y as the target, right? So we have 2 variables. So while watching this video, you try to record down how many variables are there. Of course, from the title, you can tell me income is 1 variable, life expectancy is 1 variable. But are there more variables in the video? Let's watch it together. So let me know if you can hear it, okay? I play it now.
This shows income and lifespan in the world today. Each bubble is a country. Color shows region, the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And size is population. The big ones are China and India. And this is income, GDP per capita, from $500 all the way to $50,000 per person and year. And this is lifespan, life expectancy in years. These countries have the lowest income and the shortest life. And from this corner down here, there are countries at all levels, all the way up to this corner up here with the highest income and the longest life expectancy. There are no countries here. On this high income, there is no country with life expectancy below 74. And there is no country here. On this low income, there is no country with life expectancy above 64. But look at the big picture. Most people live in middle income countries. And on the same income level, there are huge differences in lifespan, from 50 all the way to 75 years, depending on how the money is distributed and how it's used.
All right. So I know that I believe that from this video you can see that there are more than 2 dimensions that are represented. And how does income relate to life expectancy? It is not as simple as the richer you are, the longer you live, but there are other factors like the region that you are with, how the income are distributed in the particular countries. But I would like to ask you, apart from the income and the lifespan, what are the other dimensions or variables that you can understand from this visualization? I will just show you here. The next slide. So this is the snapshot of the income.
There are no countries here.
Okay, so this is actually in the book by Hans Rosling. So this is the actual visualizations that is in the book. So how many dimensions are there in one visualization? X is income, Y is life expectancy, but what are the other dimension? Any student would like to try? You know, what does the color mean? What does the size of the bubble means? Okay, so maybe I will just give you the answer. Population is represented by the size of the bubble, right? The bigger the bubble, the bigger the country, China and India. That's the third dimension. Then the color actually shows the region, which is a geographical information. For example, Asia Pacific represented by this pink. Okay, and then we have the USA and Canada represented by green and so on. Okay, so one 2D chart but capture more than 2 dimensions. Okay, if you can design it cleverly. So that's all for the first sub-module on data visualization overview. What is it about, why, and how? Now let's move on to the more technical, maybe the boring one, which is some of the design principle that we should bear in mind while designing the visualization. Okay. Have you heard of graphical integrity? Okay, we know that as a human being, we need to have integrity, right? But when you design graph, you need to design it with integrity too. Okay, so what do we mean by integrity principle when it comes to design and visualizations? It means that when you are designing your visualization, you should have clear, detailed labeling to prevent any distortion or ambiguity. One example could be the size of the physically measured graphic should be proportional to numerical quantities, right? If there is a numerical sense to the value. You should show the data variation in your data visualization and not design variation using a concept called data in ratio. And the graphics must not quote the data out of context. We will use a real life example to show this. So this is actually a screenshot of the Fox News that shows that what are the differences, okay, if the Bush tax cut expired. Can you tell me what is the issue with this bar chart here? At the first glance, it seems like, wow, there is a big difference, right? Between this graph here, January 1st, 2013, and now. It seems like the tax cut expired, then it really affects the tax rate. But is that true? Okay, I think you are all science or engineering or computing student. If you look at the y-axis, you will notice something weird because the axis does not start from 0. What if we start from 0? Do you feel different looking at this graph compared to the previous one? Now the difference is not as huge as it appears, right, in the first graph here. So this is what we mean by graphical distortion. If you didn't start at the proper common 0 baseline, you are actually trying to distort the data by showing the differences actually it appear to be very big, but in actual fact, it is not that big. Okay, so the difference in your data, okay, should be reflected correctly by the size of effect in your graph, okay? So the relative size, the axis of the bar chart should always start at 0, okay? To ensure you have a fair comparison. Another example of scale distortion using pie chart. if you look at this pie chart, which represent the market share for the smartphone by the US, right? You can see that the leading one, we have I think 39% is RIM, and then we have 21.2% other, and then 19.5% is Apple, then Motorola, then Palm, and then Nokia. If we look at the value, we know that Apple is the third highest, right? But because of the 3D illusion, it seems that Apple is the second highest. Why? Because Apple is positioned in front, and this ring, the purple color, is at the back. Even though it's 21%, it appears smaller than 19.5%. If we remove this 3D pie chart, we convert it to a 2D, then the differences, you look at it, it should be rim, and then other, and then Apple, right? So the issue with 3D pie chart is because slice at the front of the pie appears larger than it is, and the slice at the back appears smaller. And this is another example of scale distortion when you try to use 3D in your data visualizations. So as a scientist, we want to communicate our data and findings honestly. So we try to avoid this kind of issue when designing our visualization. Another best practice would be the chart jump, data to in ratio. I know we like beautiful, fancy graph, but when you are trying to create an effective visualization, we want to make sure that design, the effect, can show us data variation and not design variation. Okay, for example, this is a very fancy graph, but the next one here is better. Okay, it's clearer for us to understand in a scientific communication. So one example, what do we mean by data in ratio? Okay, if you look at this simple chart here that shows January to September, what is the percentage, right? You can see we can actually simplify this chart so that it's easier for the user to know which one is the highest month, which one is the lowest month, and what is the difference between the highest and the lowest. How do we do it? We have to remove the chart junk one by one. First of all, you can remove the unnecessary grid, okay? Okay, and then you can remove the background color. And next, you can even remove the bounding box and keep only the X and Y axis. So this version now, you can help to enhance it by making a horizontal scale that to your X, Y value here using this fine white line, okay? Make it easier to interpret across different months. And this is the resulting chart. You can see it's very clear now. Highest is June, lowest is May. What is the difference between June and May? Is about 20%, right? Because this is 5%, this is 5%. As compared to the earlier version, very fancy, but I think a lot of them are just noise. Okay, so these are some guidelines that you can consider in designing effective visualization. Last principle, your graphics must not quote data out of context. For example, you are trying to convince your friend, oh no, there's climate change, but they are showing you this graph. Hey, no, climate change is a lie. Look at this world average temperature from 1997 to 2012. There is no trend at all. Don't scare us. There's no global warming. What is happening here? You are quoting data out of context. If you look at a longer timeline, okay? Okay, we don't start from 1997. We start earlier. Okay, instead of 15 years, we look into 50 years. And now can you see the trend? Okay, so this is what we mean by we try not to leave the data out of context. If you have a full history of data, you include it first, okay, to make sure you don't have any incorrect interpretation due to quoting data out of context. So as much data as you can collect, you have to visualize and consider the large data set so that you can deliver the right information to the readers and avoid producing graphs that are out of context. Okay, so that's the integrity principle that I would like to share. Now let's move on to a more technical part of it when designing our visualization. From the computing background, actually, chart is not as simple as a chart. We do have different naming for different ingredient of the chart. For example, the visual element, we do have mark and channel. Mark are actually elements that can represent the items. Channel are actually the visual elements that can control the appearance of the mark. Okay, so let me put it simple. For example, there are two types of channel. One is identity channel, which is usually used for categorical variable, such as the shape and the color. Another channel is magnitude channel, which are normally used for quantitative variable. For example, the length and the shade of the color. Darker means higher, higher means more. Okay, so two types of channel, identity, which is categorical, magnitude, which is quantitative. And because of the way our human brain and visual perception system is designed, there are different effectiveness depending on the channel types that you use. Okay, as a human, right, actually we are more sensitive to a position on common scale, followed by the length, followed by the area, followed by color, and lastly 3D. Okay, for identity channel, we are very sensitive to the differences in the spatial region, followed by different color, and lastly the shape. So what do I mean by channel effectiveness? I think we can only illustrate this through exercises. Okay. If you look at this chart here, A and B, it is actually represented using position on a common scale because we start from the common scale here, A and B, and I ask you, how much longer do you think B is compared to A? How much longer is it? Anyone would like to try? Is it 1 time longer, 2 times longer, or same length?
I just want to say, if you don't have access to the audio, you can use of the chat and type it in the chat.
Oh, yeah, for the student. So I think you can compare A and B. Actually, B is 2 times longer, right? I hope everyone agree. Now, if I use another question now, is it the same? Is it 2 times longer or more? How about this one, A and B? Is it 2 times longer or is it 3 times? Is it 4 times? Flora said 3 times. Okay. All right, I think you know that it's more than 2 times, right? Because this is 2 times. This should be 3 or 4. Okay, so the correct answer is 4 times. It's quite easy. At least we can know that this is still more, right, than the previous example. But now if we use another channel, which is the angle, how much deeper is B compared to A? This is quite difficult. You need to use the instrument to measure now. So this is about 4 times deeper. Okay. Now I use area as the channel. How much larger is B compared to A? You can see it's getting more and more difficult, right? When we use different type of mark and channel. Okay. So actually B is 5 times larger than A. Okay. How much darker is B compared to A? It's 2 times darker. So you can see that the channel effectiveness is really different. We are the most sensitive to the length differences at the common scale, okay? And we are not that sensitive to the brightness, angle, okay? So when you need to show the differences in the numerical variables, should you use a bar chart with different length or color to show that darker means higher, lighter means lower? I think you can answer now, right? That if you want it to be very effective, you should use a bar chart. If you already use a bar chart for another variable, for the less important variable, you have no choice, but you can use brightness or saturation to represent it. Okay, so this is what we mean by channel effectiveness. With this, we are ending our second mini topic. Now, I would like to continue on with the most important part, which is storytelling. You already learned the importance of data visualizations. You know that there are some design guidelines that you should follow. For example, you should not distort your graphic due to scale or graphical distortion that can lead to integrity issue. And also should not quote data out of context. Try to visualize all the data that you have first so that you will not arrive at the wrong conclusion. And understand that for different type of variable, there are different channel that you can use, okay? For example, categorical, you can use shape or color. Numerical, you can use length, brightness, saturation, okay? Now let's move on to the storytelling. So there are two types of objective when you want to use data visualization to tell story. First, mainly, I think it's internal, like as a data scientist, data analyst, together with our team member, we may use the visualization to explore if there are any interesting patterns, okay? Exploratory. We might generate a lot of graphs and see if there are any patterns. But once we realize there are some important patterns inside, and we need to tell our decision maker, our manager, that it would be explanatory storytelling, where we want to communicate the findings from the exploratory phase and tell a story with the goal of informing and convincing our audience. And be careful, there is a fine line between showing the important data in the explanatory storytelling or manipulating presentation to fit our subjective opinions. As a scientist, we want to be objective. So we want to show the important data and communicate honestly. We shouldn't manipulate the presentation to fit our own personal opinion, okay? So what are some of the strategy that you can follow while doing storytelling? First of all, you need to know who are your audience, what you want them to know. Then with the who and what in mind, you can then decide how should you present it. Should it be done through live presentation like our sharing today? Should it be done through a documentation like a booklet, a report, which I will share with you at the end? Or can it be just a simple video like the one that we had from the first topic? Once you have decided, you will need to design a storyboard, okay, to communicate the findings. Okay, for example, what are the questions that you would like to address? What are the approaches you describe, show the before and after, and lastly, the recommendation. So this is what you can see here. The data scientists would like to show the data to show that after a pilot program, we do see increased interest of the children towards science. So there are many ways for them to communicate this finding. First one, they want to show after the pilot program, 68% express interest. As simple as that, just a number so that we know that, okay, 68% compared to 44, so it's a success. Or they can decide to use a pre and post chart that shows what is the original interest before the pilot, what is the interest after the pilot. And when we see there's an increase in the after compared to the before, then we say that the pilot program was a success. So you can see that the version here is more detailed than the first version. But maybe, depending on the audience, if you are talking to the CEO, maybe he's only interested in the actual number, how many increase, how many percentage increase. But if you are talking to the manager, they want to know in detail what are the increases across different category, then you can show this. Okay, so this is what we mean by depending on the type of the audience, okay, the questions and the decision making framework, you can choose what kind of visualizations that you want to use to convey the same message. Okay, so these are some examples that shows different type of visualization to present the same message, which is pilot program was a success. So this one is after pilot program, 68% express interest. This is actually showing that after the program, originally only 19% are excited in science, but after the program, 38% are excited. Okay, for this one, it shows before and after, just that you use a state bar chart. You can see that excited and kind of interested are the positive one, right? And we can see that after the program, we have more composition for excited and kind of interested. Another way to represent the same piece of data, how do you feel about science? We can use this slope graph. Before, about 25 and 19%, the blue one shows that they are excited of interested. But after, we see more of excited of interested. But you also see a very interesting observation here is that students who are bored or not great before and after, actually there are not much difference. But what is really effective about this pilot program is that we managed to convert student that says okay before the program to be excited and interested. Okay, so this is what we can see from this log graph. A lot of the kids in the middle, in the neutral, in the okay category, after the pilot, they are motivated to be excited and interested. And that's why the program was a success. Okay, so this is how you can decide how you want to present the same piece of data. So now let's look at an example of the data again, how we can actually apply what we have learned so far to improve a visualization. So this is actually a data that shows the frequency of Y chromosomal haplograph groups among the ethnic populations. Thing is in India. Okay, so the first impression of this chart is very complicated, right? Different region and different maybe we like to see this as a scientist, but if you want to use it to communicate to the general public, maybe this is too complicated. So how can we improve it? First of all, instead of this kind of design, you just pinpoint the cities, okay, the location. And then you remove the unnecessary bounding box just to show the composition here. Okay, and then the border here, we change to a background shaded, gray shaded, so that it will not be too contrast and affect our ability to perceive the composition. So you can see before and after. I think the right one is cleaner and easier for us to focus on the important one, which is the location and the composition. Whereas the first one, you can see we have a lot of unnecessary boxes, boundary that may hinder the information and understanding. Okay, similarly for this also, think when we want to use color in our chart, we try not to use color where one color dominate the others, because it will affect the audience. They might focus on the yellow and they cannot focus on the rest. So one best practice is that you can use color brewer to select colors that looks good together, so that it's easier for us to understand each category. So last activity for our third part of today's session is that what are the issues you think, okay, with these three graphs here? I think you can see the first one here, yellow dominates the other color. The second, the pie chart, I think is quite difficult to distinguish, especially for this pink, red, and this, maybe it's like bit red, pink, okay? And this one also is very difficult. So what we can do is we can use the online available tools like Color Brewer to choose a better color, okay? We recolor it, then now it's easier for us to distinguish, okay? So this is another advice for designing effective visualization. And lastly, I would like to end with a hands-on, but it's not hands-on, just me sharing how we are applying these design guidelines and best practices in our day-to-day work. So normally, we are using these three software to design visualizations and present them using a dashboard, okay, in a storytelling manner. So these are the three tools that are available. Power BI is part of your Microsoft product, Tableau, and Looker Studio, which is a Google product, which is free. So they are all BI tools, business intelligence tools, where you can import your data inside, create visualizations, and then design a dashboard that can tell story. So it's very important that when using this BI tool, you are picking the right visual. For example, if you want to compare dimension, we can use a bar chart. If you want to track changes or trend, you should use a time series aligned chart. If you want to highlight a single critical metric or KPI, you can use a scorecard. If you want to understand the composition of a whole set of data, like ethnic group, okay, or the products of the font, you can use a pie chart. If you want to visualize data in the real world with geographical information, please try to use a world map. It's intuitive for the user to know the location. Relationship between variable, a scatter plot. And lastly, measure how well the data performs against a target. You can use a bullet chart. Okay, so there are a lot of resources online, like picking the right visual based on the purpose of your visualization. For example, if the viewer wants to see how the revenue change over time, what should you use? A time series, a line chart, okay? If you want to compare sales of different products, a bar chart could be the best one. identify the cities, so the location where our visitor live, then just a map. Okay, as simple as that. So picking the right visual before designing is also very important. So with this, I would like to show you, this is one of the tool that I like to use recently, and it's actually an Australian product. I'm not sure if you use this before, Canva. Originally, it started off as a tool for non-designer to create their own design. It's actually a yearbook project. The founders want to use it to create their yearbook. Then they actually realized that this tool is getting very popular. A lot of people are using it. Even people from non-design background are using it. And now it is used by millions globally for visual communication. They allow you to import data also and create chart on Canva now. So this is an example of a project that I have worked on in Sarawak, where we try to understand the demographic of the elderly in the state. We look at the household income, we look at the household group, how many are actually at the bottom 40, how many are the top high income earners, and then we review it. And then we see the spending category, how many percent spent on food, how many percent spent on transportation. So we can see the top category is food and the least is the transportation. So this is actually designed using Canva. So if you are not from technical background, you find it difficult to use the BI tool like Tableau, Power BI, or Looker Studio, you can use Canva already. And the best thing that I realized is that Canva also integrated some artificial intelligence where they allow you to upload your data, your visualizations, and you type the script, and you can use it to generate a video with an AI voiceover, which I think you can use it for the start talking competition. So just come up with an idea and use it for the competition. Okay. And I wish you all the best for the competition. That's all for my sharing today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. That encouraged us to come up with a new workshop and come up with the AI version of the Canva. So that's very good. So it was very, as usual, very informative and coming with some example of the good visualization. What are the proper choices we made during our data visualization, especially acting as someone, if this is you coming from STEM area, or because this is now open to all the discipline, you're coming from different discipline. I think our role and responsibility is to choose the tool that can share the message, and that message is coming based on the fact and evidence and the science. So I think, and it's coming with more kind of an engaging. I like the idea of that video that Michael shared in the beginning of this data visualization workshop. You can see how the speaker joined to the graph and take us to the different section there and remind us about something. I think that active message and that engaging with the data was very amazing. And we would hope to see you and 4-minute videos by Monday, 3rd of November for us to review, and you invited to the live showcase on Thursday, 6th of November. Thank you so much.